Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Learners Podcast. Today we have a really interesting guest, a little bit different from some of the past ones that we've had. Where today we're talking to somebody who's founded, one of the co-founders of a startup, not just any startup, but one that's actually achieved a little bit of notoriety. And so we're excited to dig into that. His name is Bejcek, and he is one of the co-founders of Limitless. Brett, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here.
100%. First of all, I love your, I feel like that's like Brooklyn chic background, warehouse windows. That's excellent stuff right there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm such an introvert that I need to get away from the city, and be able to be a little bit of a recluse with me and my 50 houseplants. So it's sort of like a little sanctuary for me.
That's fantastic. One of the fun things about how we know each other is the previous iterations. Maybe we can start by talking about the history of the company, because I was one of your, I think, based on the user number that I got, I think one of your earliest beta testers. And one of the things that I have told people about you in particular is that you ran such a thorough and strong beta program, much better than I've seen from some other founders where I've participated in them. And I feel like this would be a great topic area for today. So maybe at a high level, why don't you start us off with what Limitless is, how it started in a bit of a different direction and then kind of evolved. And then we can kind of go from there.
Yes, I love it. So Limitless, we're building out personalized AI that's essentially powered by everything that you've seen, said, or heard. So our whole goal, is to have a single repository of all the things that you've seen, said, or heard made useful through AI. And the way that you can make it useful is a whole bunch of different things that we're actively working on. Things like to-dos, keeping track of all the things that you verbally commit to as you go throughout your day. Summaries at the end of every single conversation that you have, having a summary and notes and being able to circle back to all those moments. So really that's our focus of what we're building out right here. And we've been on quite the journey. I think in part of the fun of building a startup is really finding that product market fit. And I believe one of the strongest signals that you can get there is when you're in the really early days. How do you go about setting up a really strong beta program? And for us, that's just making sure that we have both the qualitative and the quantitative data so that we're able to make informed decisions. At a startup, things are changing, a million miles an hour. The research that you're doing right now is, maybe going to be relevant for a couple hours and maybe a couple days or weeks, but definitely not in the month span. And so it's really important to have strong qualitative and quantitative feedback loops set up. So part of how we approached that in the early days, we were building out a product called Rewind. Essentially, the idea here. And so to capture your screen every 2 seconds, OCR, which is optical character recognition, detect all the words that are happening on your screen and allow you to search through all that information that existed out there. This is a completely, new product that we were working on. We're like, I think that it's solving painful points for us, but how do we actually validate that and understand, are we moving the needle in the right direction? Are we solving painful problems for people? And I think that one of the best things that you can do is really get a solid group of people together and, get constant feedback on what you're working on from both the qualitative and quantitative perspective. So, we originally recruited every single person one by one. So it's finding someone that we think is going to have this problem. First of all, starting with the hypothesis, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? People are forgetting things. Who's forgetting things the most? It's the context switchers out there, the people that, are in back-to-back meetings all day and then go to lead their PTA meeting for their kids' school and then go tuck their kids in at night and then log back on at work to get all the work done that they, missed during those meetings. That's the people that we're after. So we started to think about, who do we know that fits into this category? Where are they hanging out? And really started to recruit them one by one. Every single person would go through an onboarding call with me, which was, 30 minutes of me sitting on my hands trying to resist the urge to help them out at every single problem that they ran into, because it's early days. It's going to be buggy software, that happens there. And throughout that process, doing a little bit of customer discovery. I think that part's really important. It's not just about the product, it's about the people and how they think that this is going to fit into their lives and the importance that exists there.
Wait, can I pause you right there? Because touching on a few interesting things here. One was the fact that you're recruiting all these people one by one. And I honestly, a lot of the times I'm surprised by how little thought people put into the recruitment for doing any kind of research. It's like, if you don't talk to the right people, it's a whole waste of time. So I think that's a really sharp point. But then tell me more about how, obviously you're doing these onboarding calls where you're getting them set up with software, but it's also a learning opportunity, it sounds like. So how did you juggle those things? What were you looking to get out of those calls?
Yeah, I think that my categories are always broad, narrow, broad, right? When it comes to the overall interview setting, broad, starting off really general, the classic, tell me about yourself. What are you doing? What made you want to take this call in the first place? And from there, they'll say interesting things and then digging down the couple layers of why about what are the actual primary motivations for you being on this call right now? If it's just, I think that you can almost tell in those moments, is there genuine excitement about, the problem that you're trying to solve here? And in the moments where there's not, you're like, okay, maybe it's the wrong person, maybe it's the wrong product. And like, that's also data that's really, really helpful about why wasn't it resonating with this person? It kind of just seemed
Mm-hmm.
like a chore for them at this point. But then there's these other people that are like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get on my hands on this. I've emailed you 10 times because one of my friends has it. And like, I'm just so excited to use the product. And like, what makes them different from the person that just sort of was like, a little bit, oh, it's okay, like I'm okay with this product, as opposed to like, yes, I can do everything to go get it. And like, those are the interesting distinctions, because you really start to narrow down on the market side of the things, so the product market fit, where people always talk about the product and there's a laser focus on the product, but the market is just as important, and like understanding the underlying motivations and desires of those people is hugely important. So yeah, we would literally recruit one by one. It was through a mix of people that had used previous products, through our networks that existed out there. And I really think starting off with that, every single data point is a story underneath it, and really understanding that nuance that exists there sets you up for success in later days as you're scaling up the company, because you can draw on those learnings that you had, because you really did start small, that existed there.
That makes a ton of sense. And so when you're having those onboarding conversations, from your point of view, is it more that you're looking for like good versus bad in terms of fit with somebody, or is it like super excited versus everything else? That's interesting to you, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a brand new type of product. It's something that people really haven't seen before. What's the threshold for like this is a good fit for this brand new product versus not?
I think I'm really listening to emotions. Like, I'm listening for the, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for. Oh my gosh. And then their mind starts to like, spin out, and they're like, oh, I can apply it to this over here and this over here. And oh my gosh, this problem I didn't even think of over here totally has the, application here. I think that, when I was listening to some of the vocabulary, like when we were first working on Rewind, people would use the words like paradigm shift, or like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this for years. And like, that genuine excitement for it is just such a strong signal that there's at least excitement and there's appetite for what you're building. Whether or not you deliver on that, that's a whole nother ballpark. But like, understanding like, is this a viable product, is there demand for this product, I think is hugely important there. And it's really, it comes down to the emotions that people have during the call, I think, is how I cipher it out.
Yeah. And then obviously you get them set up, and then there's time goes on and things either go super well or they don't, or some mix. When you were onboarding people, how are you thinking about the longevity of this, essentially this elongated feedback cycle, right? Which is
Yeah.
what these betas are.
Yeah. Again, we kind of went, I think it's good to go overboard, and it's good to like really, obsess over what you're doing here. After every single call, I would set up an individual Slack channel with each person. I think that I would do things a little bit differently, but this is the process that I had at the point. An individual Slack channel with that person. Every single day in the Slack channel, I was messaging them, and I was like, "Hey, how's your experience going today?" And it was nothing was automated. It was me, reaching out and just understanding a little bit more. And then also the big thing that we did was we married that with the quantitative data. I had a heat map of, as part of this beta program, you agreed that we would be able to have, analytics in the product for this. So we were tracking every single day how many people are, getting to that value metric that we're actually trying to go after, and how many people are like close to that value metric, how many people are like loosely engaging with the product. And we would report on this on, a week over week basis. I'd have a heat map of every single user, every single day in which they're using the product or not using the product, and marry together the qualitative research that I'm getting in these individual Slack channels that, by the way, the whole team is in this channel, so everyone has access to it. And really understanding the nuances that exist there of like, oh, this person ran into a bug. That's why they're not using it. Okay, that's a quality issue, right? Or, okay, this person thought it was going to work for this workflow, and we're just not there yet. And so like, therefore we need to focus on this problem over here if we want to win over this type of customer in the future. And I think having that level of granularity of each individual person, mapped to each individual quantitative data point, you're able to like get a better holistic understanding of what's going on to actually help drive product decisions. You're not looking at things at aggregate, like, here's the number of recorders and like searchers that we have per week. You're looking at like the individual data point. This person used or did not use your product. What can you do differently to get them to use the product?
So when I've run a program like this, one of the things that I felt, I'm curious what your point of view is, that aggregate data was incredibly misleading and unhelpful at best.
Oh yeah.
And digging into every individual story was far more powerful. And I think it's kind of surprising because, you're trying to build something that's going to scale and grow to a lot of people, but having that very solid focus on an individual, even to the point where it's like a little overwhelming, right? Because it's not 50 users in aggregate, it's 50 individuals you have to manage, and then 100 and then 250 or whatever it is. Um,
Yeah.
would you?
I
Do you think you would have gathered a fraction of the insight if you looked at it in aggregate, or would it even been in kind of like a negative value if you were just looking at the aggregate stuff?
I mean, I think that it probably largely would have been okay. I don't know if it would have been necessarily misleading in our case, but like the insights that you gain by digging down to the individual level, I think are like what you need when you're trying to take something 0 to 1, and actually being able to link back. Here's the person that turned off. Why did they turn off? The road to product market fit is like littered with users that you disappointed and that you made angry along the way, and that you hope that you'll win back one day and you'll do your best to win them back. But like there's so many people that are going to turn off. And if you run a beta program as intensely as this is sort of like the upper echelon, right? Like this is like the max returns that you can get on something because you are providing individual support from a founder level. Like you are in the weeds with them, in the trenches. You are messaging them every single day about like why they did or did not use your product. Like this is like sort of like the best that it can be in terms of customer support and care level. And I think that like if you don't have that, like and you're looking at the aggregates, then it's like okay, here's like where it actually trends out, but you don't really understand the nuance of the problems that exist there. And so, yeah, I think that the aggregates are useful for providing like a best case scenario with this like individual level of support. But I think that you always really need to drill down to the individual user level and obsess over that and like really just try to make these first beta program users happy, because if you're not able to make them happy, like are you actually able to make the rest of the market that you're going after happy? I don't know, odds are pretty slim against that, I think.
It's an interesting transition point. I worked once at a company that was working on a brand new wearable, and they were very insistent on like a big launch,
Mm.
with this grand vision and lots of product, lots of, custom hardware, like stores where you would buy stuff, and it didn't go very well.
Mm.
And it seemed very different, this approach to acquiring users, because it sounds like you're just kind of like stacking them up, right?
Yeah.
So as you feel more confident in the product, and this, it requires less of that, handheld support. Now you can go from 50 people in the beta to 500 to like 5,000, and you're moving your way up to like it being, okay, now we're ready to kind of launch. Is that how you think about it? Is ultimately the end of the quote unquote beta is we feel comfortable with this being out in the public without us, being there to help everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one way to look at it. I think that I think it's super important to establish exit criteria for a beta, because otherwise you're never going to launch. And there's like always things that you can make better. Some of the initial goals that we had set were really focused on, retention and usage of the product. When we were like, hey, can we get to a point in which, X amount of people are recording at X amount of times? And at that point, we'll feel comfortable launching. And it's not just about the product itself. It's also a lot about onboarding during these onboarding calls too, as the name implies, because every single time, oh man, there were so many times where you'd want to help in, you'd want to jump in and be like, oh, don't click that button, click this over here. But instead of saying that, you would just take down a note and then you'd improve it for the next onboarding that you had in 30 minutes from there, right? And that's really how you get a good onboarding and like understand the points of friction that exist through that as well. So I think that that's hugely important too.
What's the kind of emotional journey you go through from start to like towards exiting the beta program? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure it's a little painful, especially early on when
Oh
something
yeah.
you've worked really hard on and it's like, oh no, don't click there.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't mean to say that or
Yeah,
whatever.
but if you don't have those moments, I think that you're launching too late. You should
Yeah.
definitely, especially with the beta program, these should be early adopters, people that are more forgiving, people that will want to just be part of what you're building because of the mission that you're going after and the vision that you're going after. But yeah, definitely those first calls. I mean, some of these were with investors too, and it'd be a 50-50 coin flip on is this going to work or not? And there's really painful moments where I'm like, oh no, it just like totally blew up in my face, and I'm so sorry. But you set those expectations from the get-go where hey,
Right.
this is going to be buggy software. This is going to be, cases where I'm going to have to handhold you in some cases. Our belief is that we want to test early and often so that we can build a really great product and get these insights out to the team that's building so that we can move fast and really deliver something that we think is incredibly valuable for you. And I think that your early beta program type user is going to be someone that resonates with that. If they don't resonate with that, I don't think they're a good fit. Yeah.
So you did a really good job with this beta program. I mean, the what is it? The proof is in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys ended up having you guys did the craziest thing I've ever seen, where you just put your fundraising deck out there, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of interest in it, to say the least,
Yeah.
which was just based on the fact that the product was really working,
Mm-hmm.
right? You had crafted something that people were really using and they really liked. So that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
What, for other folks that are like, maybe they're early on in their journey, what are the few pieces of key advice you have if you're going to run a really successful beta?
Yeah, I think it's go down to the finest granularity that you can with a fine tooth comb, obsess over making a quality product that people turn into evangelists for. I think without a beta program, you really risk sort of cutting that loop out. Like I've seen people start to lean towards AI unmoderated research for some of these like customer discovery things or some of these early user things. And I'm like, oh no, I think there's definitely a place for AI unmoderated research at some points, but it's definitely not in those
Definitely
early
not this
stages
one.
when you're trying to build that connection. Because half of the reason people are going to use the product is because of you behind it and like your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with them. And the insights that you gain from that are just so, so, so valuable that you really need to focus on that. So I'd say that there's definitely a place for automation, but I would say like beta programs, you should be doing like one off, especially if you're in the early days, really like focus on customer support and making the beta users feel like really special and part of the in crowd and building up something that's amazing for them. I'd say just because you did something one way doesn't mean that you should always do it that way. I think, part of what I originally talked about was having an individual Slack channel for each user. Okay, we changed that for a second time around. We threw them all into one channel. I was really worried about like, oh, there's going to be network effects and people are going to, pile on something and I might like reduce the signal that exists there. But I think having everyone in a single channel actually was way better for the future. So that's a very tactical thing. And then I think like my last piece of advice is like, every single day that you wake up, you can make the product better if you just listen to users. And you should really focus on here's the key value metric that you're trying to deliver for this specific audience. What is getting in the way for the largest amount of people to getting to that key value metric? And how can we get this in the product with the lowest hanging fruit? And I think that part of what we try to do is, at our peak, we're shipping like 11 times a day. We are like very fast, very iterative. We want to be a super responsive to customer feedback. And I think that's how you really get those early adopters and early evangelists of your product that believe in your product because of your responsiveness, because of your care towards them.
Makes a ton of sense. I've, one thing that I've heard of that I think is really smart is, rather than Slack channels, just being like, you have to give me your phone number and I'm going to text you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love
obviously
that.
you want to opt in, obviously, and you got to be careful sometimes with texting and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it just, the friction is just gone. I saw somebody's post about this. It's like email open rates, right? Or like whatever, let's say 20%, 15%, but text message open rates are 100%, right?
Yeah.
Everybody opens their text. So that's great.
Yeah.
The closer you can get in that personal relationship and connection, that's going to make it easier to get the feedback.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have a group message with all the engineers on your team and that person and you spit it up. Like if that's what you want to go do it. I think the scrappier, the better. And I think the early adopter archetype would really sort of love that personal attention. They're
Totally
different than your normal users that exist out there.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about vision stuff, because you're not the only company out there that has decided that, always on wearables are going to be a thing.
Yeah.
There's been some interesting new products, some of them having the same name, getting into rap battles with each other, which has been fun to watch from afar. But I think as you were mentioning a little bit earlier, you have a bit of a different vision for what the future of kind of like wearable AI will mean, or what you think people will want it to mean. How do you differentiate between the direction that you're going and I think the direction you think a lot of other people are going?
Yeah, I mean, I think of AI as a tool that we are building out. And what I get so excited for is this tool has so many applications to really help us be better humans. And I think that part of what not being a better human is talking to technology instead of humans themselves. Like I want to create technology that fosters better relationships with other people, that makes you the best version of yourself. That's really what I want to go after. And so part of how we envision this is, a single repository of everything that you've seen, said, or heard made useful through AI. And we don't want you to text a Limitless instead of, talk to a human. We want to help you facilitate better conversations with humans. We want to help you reflect more about your life. Just, the other day, we were prototyping, asking these like reflection questions about, show me moments of conflict throughout my past 24 hours. I tend to be really passive in conflict, right? That's something that I'm actively working on. And I said, give me examples and give me language about those situations, about how I could handle them better. and it did such a good job, right? Like, and that's like, now I can, it's like a gift that I can take into the next time when I'm in conflict, and I can think back to this learning that I had, because we really stopped getting feedback after, high school, college, for the most of us. I mean, at best you get a quarterly review with feedback that's kind of out of date. It's a couple months away, but this is something that can give you actionable feedback every single day about the ways that you want to be growing. And the ways that you want to be growing is so different for every single person. But communication is just such a big part about how that we live our lives, and the things that we're actively working on. And, I can go through a bunch of different examples, not just about conflict, but about active listening. It kind of read me a little bit for one of my user research sessions, where it's like, hey, you weren't doing a good job of like really responding what you heard to. You were just trying to get through your list of questions that like actually said this. And I was like, okay, that one hurt a little bit. But it was
Hey,
right.
wait a minute, AI, you're not supposed to critique me.
Yeah, but it was so right and so valid and so in the moment that the next user research call that I went into totally changed my outlook. Got such a better outcome to what I was looking for. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're building for people that want to be the best versions of themselves. We can all improve in different ways. And I think that's what makes us uniquely human, is that we're always striving to, for the best that exists out there. And I think AI is going to be a tool that fits in that tool belt that's able to help you, achieve that and really unlock that full potential.
It's really it's a very different, I think, vision from a lot of the stuff that I think we find really scary about the technology,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
i.e., losing control, i.e.,
Yeah.
all these all these mechanisms and actions happening without us,
Yeah.
the world on autopilot sort of thing. How do you guys think about the way that the types of things that you want, that you think it's going to be great at doing, or that is going to be helpful for like the humans that use your product?
Yeah.
How do you think about the stuff that fits into that category versus the things where it's like, that's not, maybe another product will do that stuff, but that's not for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a little bit scary to think about losing control. And like, we always want to be clear that we're here to augment humans, not replace them. Like, that's our primary thing that we're trying to accomplish. And how we see that is having the human in the loop. So a perfect example of that is, we're prototyping some stuff with to-dos right now, where as I go throughout my day, it keeps track of all the things that I verbally commit to, which is a lot. And, before in this world, I sort of was in this panic mode before bed of, it's 11 p.m. At night and my head's racing a million miles an hour. Like, did I block somebody today? Did I forget to get something to somebody on my team? Am I letting someone down? And now I have this friend in the fight that has a list of all the things that I verbally committed to. So it's like almost just like a sanity check before I go to bed. Was there something that I said I was going to do that I didn't do? And now I can like sleep a lot better, right? Like, that's one example of like, everything's in my control at the end of the day. But it's helping me surface these things that I might have missed or might have slipped through the cracks that are going to have consequences. And ultimately, it's impacting my life a lot better. I'm sleeping better. I'm not waking up at 2 a.m., in a mad dash to like, oh, let me just go to my computer for 3 seconds and get this out to somebody because, somebody in China over there is waiting on it. I'm able to like really have a little bit more control over my life there. And, that's one example where I think that when we hear about sort of incorporating AI into our lives, the message is always like, do more, do more, do more. And I think that that's one point. But I mean, for us, it's not always about do more. It's sometimes about do better, right? It's about like, you want to have control over your time at the end of the day to live a well-lived life and to build a well-lived life. And I think through AI, like the odds of achieving that are way, way higher when you have control over how you're spending time. You don't always have to go down to the weeds for every single little thing. And you're really able to scale yourself in the ways that you want to scale yourself and grow yourself.
So next thing, I want a question I have for you, and I have to preface this because I don't want to come out the wrong way. My question is essentially, do you love your product, and at what point did that happen? And what I mean by this is, I think there is some sort of canonical advice out there, which is like, build something that, if you build something that even you like truly love, then that's fantastic. But at the same time, there's always this thing where, if the work is never done, it could always be better, et cetera, et cetera. But like, was there a moment where you're like, I love this. This is fantastic. And how long did it take you to get to that point if you've already reached it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have already reached that. When I think back to Rewind days, it was actually when we were working under an internal code name of like Memory Vault. Search wasn't even a thing. We weren't able to search across anything. I could just replay back my screen over the past week or so. And I think it was my first week using the product. I had lost a document. It had disappeared. I had no way to get back to it. I had no idea what happened. and I was able to rewind my screen. I didn't have the ability to copy and paste it. Had nothing. I was like, again, like the classic problem of like, what's the actual pain point here? How far are humans willing to like jump through the hoops to make it happen? And I found my document, and it saved my butt, because that was like, 4 hours of work that I've been putting into this thing. And for that moment alone, I was like, wow, I think this could be the future, where our brains, we forget 90% of things that happen after just 1 week, which is crazy. And, sometimes it's even like 5 minutes ago that you forget the thing that you were working on. And so I think that like that was for me the first moment where I was like, wow, I think this could be really something really big. And I'm really excited for the future of what we're building out. And that was just about memory. Like, I think that, that's really the first problem that we're working on, is helping humans have perfect memory. And then the second piece, I've had so many moments of joy with some of the things that we're prototyping around the to-dos, for example. There was one thing that I totally said I was going to go do, for a user research project that I was working on. And again, the way that we work is pretty much like these days for user research, I have like one day of recruiting, and then the next day is all the interviews scheduled. And by the end of that night, like I'm putting out the insights, because again, things change so fast.
Wait,
so,
you're still doing all the research?
Yeah.
Okay, whoa. Because look, guys, if Brett didn't want to do the research anymore, or didn't think it was important for him to do the research, Limitless could afford to have somebody else do the research.
Yeah.
Why has it been important for you to continue in that work?
We're still wayfinding. I think, AI is this wild west frontier. Things are changing every single day. Yeah, you can outsource to contractors or bring someone on full time, but during those early days when things are changing a million miles an hour, and I just think that you have to have someone that is absolutely obsessed with the product that they're building, actually lead out that research to help guide the product strategy of what we're doing moving forward. I think that like it also is like I think that the type of person that would thrive in a 0 to 1 sort of user research role is also very special too. And it's sort of like I don't know, not to say like a unicorn role, but like I think that you need a qualitative background and a quantitative background. You have to understand the right level of fidelity when it comes to research. Like I'm planning research out in like hours, not like, quarters, in terms of like the insights that we need to get. Things are constantly like changing priorities. It's like a bunch of whirlwinds. Like even for today, I'm scheduled, or actually this past week, I scheduled some user research sessions, and it was actually no longer relevant, even though it was like 1 day turnaround, because of some things that had changed internally. And so that's how fast things are changing here. And sure, you can bring someone on board, but I think that a lot of these insights that we're getting are just so critical for the business.
Well, and I think one of the other things is like when you've been there since the very, very, very beginning, right? You have so much context and like embedded intuition about things, and to interpret what's important, and how to make use of it, and how other people need to make use of it. That's wild, man. I did not expect that. That's really great to hear. And folks, I don't know if you were listening in, but he said when you're in the early days, you're 1,000 days into this thing, man. Like this is, you're speaking to a long-term vision here. When year 3 or 4, what are you, year 3 now?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But truly, like we want this to be our life's work. We don't want to. Yeah. We're not here to make a quick buck. I mean, I think that like when you're in this is still the early days for me. I think that we're only going to do crazier and crazier, and hopefully more valuable things for end users. And I think that we're still like really, really early on with our journey of what we have planned.
I love that. Yeah. So now you've made a lot of progress, a lot more users. You've shipped stuff. It's amazing. How is like your work and your role set of responsibilities, however you want to define that, how has it kind of shifted as you've gone from the very beginnings to where you're at now, where you've got quite a fair bit of funding, a decent sized team with some really talented people? I know some of them. What's new?
I think that it's been a really fun evolution. So when I first started off, I was just laser focused on data science and user research, and really leading out that front. And as we got some traction, as we better understood that, then my role kind of evolved to also take on recruiting as well. So bringing on more people to the team. So leading that out, some operations shenanigans that needed to happen. Also taking on support as well, and making sure that our customers have a really good experience. I think that's one thing that's been really insightful, is just the link between support and user research, and how I think that when I think about like what a really impactful early stage researcher could do is like they could run support for the company, right? Like that's where people are talking to you. That's where people are complaining about all their issues or telling you how much they love the product. And I think that that's where you gain just so much insights. And a mistake that when I've consulted for other companies that are like doing user research stuff in like a B2C consumer space, a lot of them like try to outsource support right away. And I'm like, no, that's like the most valuable signal that you can possibly have for your company. It's people that are taken that they've had enough interest to physically write you in some capacity or call you or communicate with you in some capacity, which is already such a high bar. It's people that are either super super happy or super super angry, which those are sort of like sibling emotions. They're not necessarily opposite emotions. Like if you have someone really angry, that means they're really invested and they care a lot. So like figure out why they're angry and like what made them angry. And there's just such like a wide assortment of things that you can do to really mine those insights that exist there. But yeah, so I took on that. And then, just, continue to run user research programs. So as we're building out the hardware product, I think it's really important ever since we had this really early like plastic prototype that we started doing user research with to understand how it's going to, look and feel in people's hands. As soon as we had our first, prototypes that were actually metal based, putting that, doing unboxing, everything, really just trying to nail down that first user experience, because with the hardware product, it's very different than software, right? You pretty much get one shot when the user is unboxing it. They're making their evaluation, they're making their decision. And because of that, the stakes are so much higher that you really have to put a lot of emphasis in there. So I've been also focusing a lot on that these days too.
I love it. Okay. Last question here. What's the number one thing that somebody can do to kind of like brighten your day or be a joy to work with, in your capacity as one of the founders of the company, that you think is maybe a little counterintuitive?
It's counterintuitive. That's a good question. I was going to say something that wasn't counterintuitive, which is just the ownership piece, I think is huge. Where if you hire really smart people that are capable beyond their beliefs, I think that they're able to move mountains with the things that you do. You don't need a large team to go do it. You just need someone that is really, results driven and wants to climb that hill together. And I think that for me, that's the biggest piece, is really being able to trust in people to be able to take something that's just the kernel of an idea and carry it out in a way that's more magnificent than we could have ever imagined. And I think that those are the people that have found really a lot of success at the company.
I'll take it. I like it.
Yeah.
Actually, technically, final question. If I go to New York to visit you, can I get one of your Limitless wearables?
I'll hook you up. I'll make it happen. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, amazing. Folks, if you want to check it out, it's a really fascinating product with a really great story, and led by somebody who really has the care on the research side, the supporting customer side. So it's a great company to support. Check them out at limitless.ai. Did I get the URL right? I feel like
nailed it.
Perfect. Limitless.ai. So check it out. Brett, thanks so much for joining us. Folks, see you at the next episode. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Catch you next time.